never ever think I won't make a decision, and I'll make it damn quick. You may not like it, but I'll make it.
Bordenkircher was just disliked. He became both unfair and abusive. And abusive in the sense that he oppressed or repressed prisoners, he kept them locked down.
He woke up one morning and felt that there may be trouble today. He locked the institution down. And I could find no basis of ascertaining why any rational human being would do such an act. And to put it in a word, I would say he's a nut.
I'm an expert at operating and administering to prisons. During the time I was here, there were less escapes, less assaults, and a smoother functioning institution. The record's clear. That's not bad for an old man. I started out as a correctional officer and I elevated to the ranks of warden. I was once the death row sergeant at San Quentin for 5 years. I was a lieutenant, program administrator. Then I went to Southeast Asia with the United States government and I was the United States Director of Prisons to the Republic of South Vietnam, where I served for 5 years during combat conditions. Then I was the warden of the West Virginia State Penitentiary on 2 occasions. And once the warden of the Kentucky State Penitentiary at Edible. And on those 3 last occasions, it was to restore peace and order from chaotic conditions. And we succeeded. And now I am the sheriff of Marshall County and have been for the last 4 years. I also spent 3 months in Saudi Arabia for the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia's prison system. And the only Saudis in jail are those that have run over somebody in a car and can't pay for the damages. In fact, if you steal, they cut your damn hand off, you see. And if somebody kills you, or for that matter anybody, by, let's say, fire, then you're going to die by fire. And they just take you out and pour gas on you and pop. You're gone, see. They have very, very little crime. So my attitudes are forged by my experience. I believe we should have a death penalty. And I don't believe it should be something written on a piece of paper. I believe it should be swift. And people say, well, it doesn't deter crime. That's always the big thing. And my big thing in retort of that is this. I have witnessed 13 executions. And I can guarantee you that none of those 13 people ever killed anybody again. You have people in this West Virginia State Penitentiary that have killed 5 people since they've been incarcerated in this prison. And they'll kill again, and they'll tell you that. So why are we playing with these people?
A tense overnight standoff at the West Virginia Penitentiary. About 200 prisoners at the 120-year-old Moundsville institution seized 16 hostages yesterday evening and threatened to kill some unless conditions were improved. 1 inmate died in the takeover.
At about 11:30 last night, inmates at the Kentucky State Penitentiary seized partial control of the institution. Some correctional officers have been taken hostage, and fires are burning within the walls of the prison. It is not known at this time if any loss of life has occurred, and few details on the current situation are available.
The blue and white Plymouth Fury belonging to deceased State Trooper Philip Kesner was found shortly after 8 o'clock this morning by city police here in Waynesburg, Pennsylvania. The car had been commandeered the night before by the escapees of the state penitentiary in Moundsville. Upon inspection, Pennsylvania State Police found escapee James Lester Collins dead in the back seat of the auto. Last night's escape underlines an apparent disregard for security at the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville. The inmates still at large are considered extremely dangerous. Police urge you to call them if you notice anyone suspicious. Do not confront them yourselves.
When all else fails, my experience has been call Bordenkircher. You want to restore order, you want to put something back on its feet and bring things back together from the doldrums from which it came, call Bordenkircher. Now, what that calls for is as I tell you this thing, I envision myself carrying an enema bucket with me, you see. And that means I've got to come into a situation that's more or less chaotic, that has to be reconstructed from the ashes, much like Phoenix, and I've got to administer an enema.
West Virginia State Penitentiary in care.
In 1972, the West Virginia State Penitentiary was racked by a severe riot. Over $500,000 in property damage. The inmates were running amok. The food was prepared in a hellhole. The stories of rats crawling all over food supplies was fact. It wasn't something dreamed up for national TV. It was a shithouse. Period. They asked me to come look at the place, and I did. And I took the job. Now you got to understand, I've been all over the world doing my business. And I'm telling you, this prison was one of the worst I've seen, and I've seen some hellholes. The inmates, they don't want to cooperate doing nothing. You got inmates wearing like these Chicano Pancho Villa types wearing dual knives underneath their armpits, threatening to kill everybody and everything else. Now what do? You got construction gangs lined up down Jefferson Avenue, and they're ready to go in and do renovation ordered by the governor, and the inmates are saying, you come in here and try to fix anything, we'll kill you. You got a mess on your hands. How are you going to build a set of testicles back on the correctional officers and go in there and take that institution back? Number one. Number two, how are you going to gain the light and support and concern of the inmate body to clean up this institution, get those contractors in, and get this place fixed up, and maintain peace and order? Was a phenomenal task. So I got all the correctional force together, and I said, all right, get all them damn convicts in the dining room together. All of them. I want to talk to them. So they all come in the dining room with a big time chip on their shoulder. And I said, we've got construction crews out here ready to come in this penitentiary and renovate this institution. We got $8.3 million of new things to be done. And here's what we're going to do. And I told them about it. And it takes your cooperation. It takes your help. And right now you're saying you're not going to do it. And I don't give a shit. I really don't care. Because on Christmas Day, I'm going to let your girlfriends and your mother and your dad and your brothers and your sisters and your grandma and grandpas come in here and have Christmas Day with you. And I want them to see what a bunch of shitheads you are. then they'll really know that you're at fault. We're not. And I turned around and walked out. And man, it worked. It flat worked. They cleaned it up. They did it themselves. Oh, over here at the penitentiary, during the time that I was there, you've got the old air ventilation systems, which the inmates tore all the guts out of. So what they do is they crawl up in the damn ventilators and they go up and go out on the roof and drop off and run across the street. So since we couldn't have available to us all the money it takes to fix the ventilator systems and put on proper security devices, I called the dog pound and I told them I needed a bad dog. Now, the dog they brought me had to be sedated before we could even put it up on the roof. And that's a wild story, but they had to sedate the dog, and we put this dog up on the roof. Now, this dog had a long list of arrest history and had all points bulletins issued on it and everything else. But this was a mean dog. And that kept him from sneaking up through the ventilator system. Of course, when the inmates would come out during the day, they'd raise up and yell at the dog and call him names and scream at him, and the dog would go totally bananas. And they didn't know that we're in the background making tape recordings of this ferocious dog going off. Right? So then in the evenings when the dogs had to bed down, then we had select people on each shift that would take these tape recordings we had and move them all over the institution. It's always been said in this business that a good warden is about 75% good con.
He played with us, man. He played with us. He had a tendency to impose certain hardships upon the population of this institution simply because he was in a position and authority to do so. No basis whatsoever. I mean, if he woke up one morning and felt that there may be trouble today, he locked the institution down.
Of course, his reputation always precedes Bordenkircher, wherever he may go, it appears. When I first got word of him, prisoners told me, well, here this guy was like a warden, if you will, over prisoners in Vietnam, that he was the one that initiated those underground cages that you see those Vietnamese prisoners in, and he ruled them with a harsh hand, and Mr. Tough Guy, you know, like Patton or John Wayne.
I am absolutely prepared for full-blown Vietnam any day of the damn week.
When they tighten down, it makes prisoners tense. When they take things away, they make things tense.
We have well, sort of like a Navy traffic pattern. You tell them when to get up, when to go to school, when to go to the exchange, when to go to the laundry, when to come back to their cell, when to go to lunch. And we go by the numbers, and they do it in lines. And that's why we're found to be terribly harsh and restrictive and mean.
His policies more or less oppressed the prisoners. They had less time to do things. They were confined in their cells more hours. For the slightest incident, he would have locked the prison down, every person in the prison down, for a week or two.
I don't really know what the other fellows do. I know what I do. And any time that I feel that something's not safe, something's not secure, and I have 800 of the state's most incorrigible people that I'm responsible to the state to take care of, I'm going to lock down. And I'm not going to ask a convict for his damn permission. I'm going to do it. And he's going to do what he's told.
I mean, somebody go out there and they kick their heel down on the ground, they charge him with digging a tunnel.
When it comes to a matter of security and safety in a maximum security penitentiary, and the security and safety of the people who live out here, right outside the walls of this penitentiary, it's always better to appear before the governor or the commissioner of corrections and get chewed out for locking up and being on the safe side than it is to get chewed out for not locking up and losing your penitentiary. I never lost the penitentiary. And any time that a warden fails to err on the side of caution, security, and safety, then he's a loser. He must keep people safe and secure. I am a conservative, professional warden. I get paid to administer to an institution. All the responsibility and accountability is mine for what I do and what I don't do. The difference between that and Ron Williams is simply this. Ron Williams is a convicted liar and multiple killer who's an expert at doing time in prison. I'm an expert at operating and administering to prisons. That's the great difference. During the time I was here, the record's clear. There were less escapes, less assaults, and a smoother functioning institution. What Ron Williams thinks about it, I could care less.
A lot of prisoners looked upon him, they think he's psycho. You know, he's just crazy, you know. And they probably have some grounds for that belief. I would point out that he did, I don't know whether you're privy to it or not, after the initial takeover of the riot on January the 1st, 1986, he armed a bunch of his deputies, he's a sheriff here in Marshall County, and ran over here to the prison and attempted to storm the prison, but of course he was denied that opportunity, and he campaigned and lobbied with the current warden, Hedrick, to do that. And fortunately, I think common sense and a wise decision on the part of Hedrick disallowed him to run on in here. Had he been permitted to do that within an hour after the initial takeover, he would have probably had numerous prisoners killed, and probably all or nearly all of the hostages would have been killed. But fortunately, all the hostages got out in fairly good condition. None of them were seriously injured. But had he had his way, that is one example of the psychosis that he's often referred to as having.
The fact that nobody had any real details of what was going on, number one. Number two, inmates had control of the radios and they're talking back and forth to each other. And the fact that it was very obvious at the time that what was going on was planned but was totally disorganized, that's the time to take it. If you wait much longer and you allow them to get organized, you'll never be able to take it by force.
The evidence in regards to his desire to come back in here and take things over an hour after 16 or 17 guards were in here, and he was not concerned about the lives of these guards. You can imagine how he felt about the lives and the well-being of the prisoners.
That evening we were ready, and we were available to the warden and the commissioner if they wanted us. I'm not shocked at all to think that we may have been used to come in and take the institution by force. Hell, that's what we were there for. It was an option to be used by the governing body of corrections if they wanted to do it. They chose not to. Now, had they have chosen to have law enforcement enter that institution and restore order quickly and with force if necessary, we would have done that. And if Ron Williams would have been there, he simply would have been asked in a gentlemanly way and in a fast way to move his ass and do exactly what he's told. And if he wouldn't have done that, he'd have been shot. It's that simple. Mao Zedong, I think, said, man's greatest asset is also his greatest defect. This asset that I have of education, training, and experience, it's not worth a damn if you're a wimp. And when somebody asks you a question, you blind them with footwork rather than say, here's how I feel about it. And all that's a great asset, but you see, it's my greatest defect. My mouth. the new commissioner called me. He said, how about coming down to Charleston? He said, I've got to talk to you. We need to know each other. The commissioner told me, he said, well, let's talk a little bit about Moundsville. He said, you do a lot of speaking. He said, you know, you travel all over the state speaking about prisons. And he said, I think that's a good idea, but in the future, I want you to give me a prepared speech and give me an opportunity to edit it. And that way I'll know what you're talking about. I said, yeah. I said, no, we're not going to do that. I said, if you want to go speak to anybody, you feel free to do so and say whatever turns you on, and frankly, I'm going to do the same thing. And he said, well, then you and I are going to have problems. Another issue was personnel at Moundsville. And he said, here's a list of people that we've determined are not sufficient in terms of doing their duties properly, and I'd appreciate it that when you return that you fire them forthwith. And he gave them to me. And I said, Commissioner, this is some of the best people I've got. And I said, I'm not going to fire them. I want to promote them. He says, no, you fire them, and here's a list of some extremely fine young people that we would like you to hire in their stead. Now, as it all happened, the list of firings were Democrats and the list of hirings were Republican. All right, now I've gone through that before in other places, you know. I wasn't extremely shocked by that, but I was pissed. Well, what it seemed like to me is when you get into telling a guy what he's going to say and what he's not going to say, who he's going to hire, who he's going to fire, in essence, you're going to pull his strings and push his buttons, and this guy's going to walk and talk just the way you want him to. No, I'm not going to do that. You know, I won't do that for nobody. So I told him, I said, I've met assholes like you before, and you don't need me. So, what do you say we just split the sheets nice and clean?
Monday night, Bordenkircher resigned as warden of West Virginia's maximum security institution. When he gave him the job, Moore praised Bordenkircher as a professional penologist of high caliber who would do a good job. And yet from the start, the Coshocton, Ohio native gained a reputation as a boat rocker. He claimed to have inherited a financial mess, demanded and finally got an audit of the prison's books, overspent his budget, and now he's claimed that some state officials are carrying on fraudulent transactions through the prison. Bordenkircher instituted a number of reforms. He even held a big Christmas party inside prison walls for the inmates and their families. But it now appears that he never did strike it off well with his superiors, the Public Institutions Commissioner and the Corrections Commissioner. And so he's left his job.
I'm trying to please the governor, and I'm trying to please the Commissioner of Corrections and all the associate commissioners, and I'm trying to please the West Virginia legislature, and I'm trying to please the inmates and their family, and I'm trying to please all the staff and their family, and I'm the hub of it all. And that's where the shaft goes. I can't win. I've got to go to the people and ask them to re-elect me.
Local election coverage continues here on Channel 7.
We don't have a place in this county to put a battered and abused child. Do you know that? We got to take them to Ohio County. But yet you and I spend $200,000 a year to run a dog pound.
Going down to Marshall County, lots of interest in the race between Don Bordenkircher and Robert Leitner, and it's fairly close as expected, with former Sheriff Leitner leading Bordenkircher 1321 to 1044.
You know, I'll run for sheriff because at least it's something I know about. I've been advised by good friends who kind of know this political thing that I did everything wrong when I ran in '84. But as it turned out, I won. And I had no idea how to do this thing of running for political office. And I'm going to be extremely candid with you and tell you I don't know now.
Still a tight race for Marshall County Sheriff. We have Bordenkircher with 1,705 votes, Leitner with 2,061. Those figures are correct with 30 out of 57 precincts reporting.
I'm educated in what I do. I'm trained in what I do. I'm experienced in what I do. I'm calm under pressure. I'm mature. I'm very firm in character and purpose. And those are the reasons that I think I should remain your sheriff.
That contest for Marshall County Sheriff has been decided. Robert Leitner has defeated Donald Bordenkircher by a margin of 669 votes.
And someday they're going to take politics out of all of it. And I hope it's in my lifetime, because I'll enjoy watching it, you see. They're going to take all the politics out of it and look at it as a professional business. And we're all going to be better for it. Now that my term as sheriff is concluded, I can frankly tell you that I don't know exactly what I'm going to do or where I'm going to do it. I only know that I honest to God believe it's going to be something awful exciting and challenging, and I'm looking forward to starting it.